Hello, fellow baseball nuts, and a very big warm welcome to episode 24 of the Jonny and Josh Show. 24, of course, the most lucky number according to numerology. It brings luck, it brings wealth, health, happiness, and prosperity, all of which is completely appropriate because, of course, this is a very special program as my dear friend Josh Chetwin joins me, and he is, of course, the birthday boy. You're back, big guy. How's the birthday been?
It's been above and beyond, Goldie. I've had a great weekend. I've missed you guys. It's been 2 weeks because I've had a lot of on-the-road curling. But I like all the things 24 represents. I would like to have them all, please. Can you make that happen for me?
Well, I'm assuming on your birthday you had a bit of prosperity and happiness. You know, everybody was wishing you good health and you were getting loads of presents and maybe a little bit of money in an envelope. I mean, all of those things.
No brown paper envelopes, but definitely a lot of love. From you amongst them and Erik and Dave. I'm very grateful. I've lived a blessed life to this date, and I don't ever take that for granted. So yes, you're right.
Talking about a blessed life, you also mentioned the fact that you've not been with us for 2 weeks because we all know you've been curling at a rather significant competition. Fill us in. How did it all go?
Yeah, it started great. So last week was it's the pre-Olympic Qualifier series. So it's the first round of Olympic qualifying to be the U.S. representative. Our team qualified for that first round. It's a 2-tournament series. The first one was this past weekend. The second one is in October. The winner of each of those goes to the final trials. And we started off great. We beat the U.S. junior national team in the first game. And then the second game, we played the favorites. And we were tied 5-5 coming home in the last end. And it came down to the last shot, and we lost that one. They ended up actually earning the spot in the Olympic trials at the end of the tournament. And we just didn't pull it together after that. So we did not do as well as we should have. Played in a tournament this weekend here back at home, not for any Olympic purposes. And we did all right. We won the second event for that. So that was nice to win some games.
But you still have one qualifier that you can put this all right and still have a chance to fight for your place.
Yeah, it's first weekend in October in Cleveland, Ohio. We will be going and giving it a second shot. So, you know, the reality is that in any given game, we're as good as any of these other teams, and we've played them tight. It's just getting over the hump. You know, it's as much mental as it is physical, I think. So
hey, it's all about the mental strength, and we've just seen an 18-year-old girl take on the world and show unbelievable maturity to win, you know, the first GB female tennis player to win a major event since what? Virginia Wade, 1977, Silver Jubilee.
There's something about the unexpected that makes you perform better. So the year I went to the U.S. National Championships and we finished 9th in the country, my team had no expectations. When you start building expectations on yourself, any sport becomes harder. Yeah. And so she was in a perfect position, right? No expectation. She was a qualifier, you know, no one expected anything, and she ran the table. And having that mentality of nothing to lose is the best way to go into sports. I always feel that way.
Absolutely. And I've always maintained that, you know, as a man who's totally unspoiled by failure, I can always come from that very low base because everything else is up. And you won't be surprised to know, of course, with our biblical reference each and every week, the number 24 is closely connected with heaven, JC. That doesn't surprise me at all. Used as a symbol of duty and the work of God. Now, the other piece of information, great. I'm loving this, by the way. Number 24. I'm going to ask you a question. What do the avocado, rice, and grasshopper have in common, big guy?
I do not know, Goldie.
I'm not surprised you don't know. They all have 24 pairs of chromosomes. There you go, JC. A man who knows everything, but not on this occasion. How about that for a bit of trivia?
I love it. I do know that one of the greatest players of all time wore number 24. A guy who I don't think gets as much credit as he deserves, because I would put him in one of the top 10 players of all time.
Willie Mays?
Ricky Henderson.
Oh, Ricky Henderson.
Willie Mays is top 3. I mean, everyone's going to know that. But to me, I feel like Ricky Henderson is very underrated. He's, in my opinion, the greatest leadoff hitter that ever played the game.
And I think in his own words, Ricky thinks Ricky's right. Yeah, if you remember.
Ricky knows. Ricky
knows.
Third person Ricky. We love Ricky.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because there's another 24 that is one of my all-time favorite players, and I'm a big fan of what Ricky Henderson did, and obviously Willie Mays is, you know,
top 5 Willie Mays. I didn't mention it because it's just
it's a slam dunk. Yeah, absolutely. But one of my all-time favorites, who was also 24 number, retired for the Mariners back in, I think it was August 2016, the truly great Ken Griffey Jr.
Yeah. Great player. You wonder if he would have been in that conversation for top 5 if he hadn't have dealt with so many injuries. I mean, you look at his counting numbers, and last time I was on the show, he was one of the trivia answers, and I didn't even realize how many home runs that he had broken the 600 barrier. I mean,
Yeah.
did he put up those numbers dealing with the injuries he had? He was the kid, right? So natural at the game.
When people were talking about, and we're going to be getting to this later on, the summer of '98 with Big Mac and Sammy. In '97, it was Mark McGwire and it was Ken Griffey Jr. And Ken Griffey Jr. was the man who was expected to possibly break Roger Maris's record with Mark McGwire. And he did end up in the high 50s both seasons. And my understanding is he's never been tainted by the accusation of drug use or steroid use. And certainly his physique never really radically changed throughout his career. So I totally believe that he played clean. So when you look at the numbers that he achieved out of just pure talent, I love Ken Griffey Jr. I'm just a massive fan.
There's general conventional wisdom that left-handed hitters have prettier swings than right-handed hitters. It's one that I actually agree with. Yeah. And of all the left-handed hitters who ever played the game, his has to be one of the top 3 most beautiful swings. It was poetic. It was just poetic.
Well, we should also give a mention to the other notable 24s that have been retired. Whitey Herzog, of course, with the Cards back in 2010. Tony Perez with the Reds. Walter Alston with the Dodgers. Jimmy Wynn with the Astros. So
it's Toy Cannon. The Toy Cannon. That was his nickname.
Is that right? Fantastic. Okay. But I think, we focused on the ones you need to mention. Willie Mays, Ken Griffey Jr. and Ricky Henderson. Right. Quick COVID update. I have no idea, quite frankly. Normally this is one we throw to Erik. There are still players out there, it seems, that
I mean, Chris Sale got hit by it. The guy works his way all the way back from Tommy John surgery, misses a year and a half, throws great in 3 or so outings, and then he gets hit with COVID. I don't know if it was a breakthrough case. I don't know whether he was one of the people who've decided just to forego the vaccinations. I mean, either way, it's awful. But I hope that it was a breakthrough rather than the second of the two, because it's just, it doesn't make sense to me. I know we talk about this all the time.
Yeah, we don't want to go down the same route, but we should reference. I mean, I think the president has made reference now, hasn't he, to sports teams and to players and the responsibility to get vaccinated. I mean, I think he's starting to wade in on the argument. So I hate to say it, but given how strongly people feel about it, particularly people that are anti-vaxxers, this is just an argument that's going to run and run and run. I just don't see what the solution is. Ultimately, you can't force people to do it, even if it's the most obvious thing that you should be doing.
I mean, this comes down, Goldie, to the ultimate discussion that we have all the time is what are the roles of athletes? They, whether for better or for worse, do serve as heroes for people.
Yeah.
And I know players say, look, I'm just an athlete, like, don't put that on me, but it's really hard not to. And I do feel there's a certain responsibility there. And obviously the players don't. And there are a lot of players who felt very strongly about this very differently from the way I feel, but it's really hard to handle that. I really have issues. So.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Obviously, we'd love you to get involved. You can see at the bottom of the screen, there's all the buttons that you can hit, your likes, your subscribes, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, the Jonny and Josh Show, whether it be on Facebook or, of course, on Twitter. Now, before we close out the introduction, of course, we have our in-game trivia. And this one's for you, from me, big guy. I've got all excited because I wrote an article last week about the summer of '98. We're going to be discussing it later in the show. This week was, in fact, how many years ago? 98, 23 years ago, when Big Mac went and hit the 62nd home run to take the record off Roger Maris, and all the excitement that generated in the race with Sammy Sosa. So here is your trivia question in honor of that extraordinary summer of baseball. You're going to love this. I looked at all the teams, the two of them. Well, Sammy ended up with 66, Big Mac with 70. So that's 136 home runs. And between them, they hit about 21 ball clubs they hit home runs against. Okay. So my question to you, JC, is which club were the most Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa home runs hit against? Was it the Phillies?
Okay.
Was it the Marlins? Was it the Brewers? Or was it the Expos?
Okay.
Those are your 4 options, big guy. And the only clue I'm going to give you is they were the top 4 that they were hitting again. I'm very happy to say the Braves only gave up 5 in total. But those were the top 4. The Phillies, the Marlins, the Brewers, or the Expos. But one of them was significantly more than any other. And the question that I'm asking you is, which one is it? Okay.
Good question, Goldie. Well done.
Okay, mate. Okay, right. Well, there goes. I haven't got a bell, buddy. I don't know. What can we do? Anything? I'm looking around.
Yeah, you just got to do this. I just go like ding dong.
Okay, ding dong. Okay, all right. Well, there we go. Ding dong. Right, we move off. Lead-off batter is, of course, the news roundup. And here we go. Well, if you work in a newsroom, JC, you know that your editor's job is to always start with the headline act. What's the biggest news story of the week? Surely, if you're a British baseball fan, there can only be one story, and that is the update of GB Baseball from the European champions. I know head coach Drew Spencer, I saw him tweeting at the beginning of the week about his excitement. We're going to go and do something. We're going to make some history. And they have.
They're off to a great start. I mean, I get so excited during the European Championships. I played in 5 of them, but I am so old. My last one was 2005, and they've come a long way. The program gets better and better all the time. In 2007, they won a silver medal, and then since then they've had some ups and downs. But under Drew Spencer, it's been a really good team. They opened up the European Championships, which are taking place in Italy, against France, which has a very solid side, very good domestic league. The pitcher on the mound for France, Owen Ozanic, is a very good longtime European pitcher. And Great Britain won. They won 7-2.
Wow.
Today, Sunday, to start off. They're in pool play. The 2 other teams in their pool are Israel, who went to the Olympics. They have a number of those players, although the squad won't be as strong as their Olympic squad, and Russia, which has been a solid squad that just got elevated back into the top level of European baseball. But it's not beyond the pale that they could win their pool and put themselves in a good position to really compete with some of the real heavyweights in Europe, typically are Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands. So here's hoping for them. To tell you how old I am, Goldie, the first base coach for that team is a guy named Jonathan Cramen. Yeah. When I started the London Mets senior team, he was a 17-year-old kid. He's now the first base coach on the national team.
Love it, man.
He was like our right fielder, trying to get in the local kids in. Yeah. And now he's had a whole career, and he's the first base coach on the national team.
Fantastic.
So he's a great guy, great for him. And
you're clearly a big fan as well of the job that Drew Spencer's done, because obviously he's relatively new to the job.
Yeah, great person. I mean, there've been great managers, great stewards of the program. Liam Carroll was a fantastic steward. Stefan Rapaglia before that, who I played for at the end of my career. They're great guys. Brad Marcelino, who was a teammate of mine for many years on the national team, is their hitting coach. Fantastic hitting coach. He's worked with Manny Ramirez, who was a hitting coach for USD for Chris Bryant. So they have great personnel working with the players. The team is, as has been the case since I sort of started the process of taking players who had British passports who didn't play in Great Britain in 96. Myself and a guy named Pete Arthur were really the first players to come over and play. That's very commonplace now, but there's a nice combination. There are players who play in the domestic league, guys like Jordan Edmonds, who are on that squad, to go along with guys who have passports. A couple of guys, I think there are 3 guys in the British Virgin Islands, other guys who live in the US who have British passports. So it's a nice mixture of players, and I will be rooting for them every game. I'm so excited for GB to get off to a good start.
Fantastic. And we will, of course, bring you updates on all our shows, and wish GB Baseball the very best in the European Championships. Right, let's move on. Hall of Fame inductions last week, of course. They still haven't identified the writer who didn't vote for Jeter to make it unanimous. It's still a mystery, JC. I sort of love this story. It does make me laugh. I mean, what idiot who knows and writes about baseball hasn't, love him or hate him, you've got to vote for him, surely.
No, the reason you don't vote for him is because you don't think he should be a unanimous selection. You believe he should be in the Hall of Fame, but you're making the point that is Jeter better than Willie Mays? Is Jeter better than Hank Aaron? These guys, none of them were unanimous. Obviously, Jeter should be in the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about it. You look at the counting stats, you look at the performance of the teams he was on, but he's not the greatest player of all time. I'm sorry, Yankees fans. And I think most Yankees fans would concede that too. He's not the greatest Yankee of all time, right? I mean, Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, it's silly. So when he sort of makes a snide remark about that, like,
which he did
Jeter,
in his speech.
Your life has been golden, dude. Like, just enjoy the moment, right?
Get over so basically, you're telling me that the Hall of Fame is no better than the Eurovision Song Contest. The votes are all political. Everybody's voting for each other on the promise of a little backhander. Is that what you're basically?
No, I mean, there is a certain amount. Like there have been players who've gotten one vote who didn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Jim Deshaies went out to dinner on it. Former pitcher for the Astros. I think he got one vote, and he was like, "Hey, I got a Hall of Fame vote, right?" Yeah. And that's because there are writers out there who want to say, this person's not a Hall of Famer, but I want to show respect to their career. So it's true that people don't always vote for that, but there's so much subjectivity. And this is one of the big problems. We're looking forward to next year where Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are in their final year. And you're going to have the first year for David Ortiz and A-Rod, two players that have a little bit of the cloud of performance enhancing drugs will be coming on. And if you don't put in Clemens and Bonds, I don't know how you ever put in Ortiz and A-Rod. And if those guys go in because there's been enough time spent and they have their 10 years and people get even farther away from it, and you don't put in Bonds and Clemens, who quite honestly, to me, were better players than Ortiz and A-Rod, then it's just completely broken. And so my vote is for Bonds and Clemens to go in. I don't like them as people. I mean, I don't know them personally, but all the experience and everything people have said, Erik meeting Clemens and how awful he was, I don't love them, but they were the greatest players of their time. And if there was a preponderance of players who probably use performance enhancing drugs and they just happened to be the ones, A, who got caught, and B, who, their careers just got even better. I mean, to me, they were Hall of Famers anyway. They need to go in the Hall of Fame because they represent that era. And then you can look at A-Rod and Ortiz a little bit more objectively and not worry so much about the taint.
I'm 100% in agreement with you, buddy. I like the fact that a statement's been made and they haven't gone in first year, second year, third year. I like the fact they've been made to wait, because that's a statement of, we're not happy with what happened and we want to make that statement. But I 100% agree with you. They were just unbelievably good players, regardless of what they then went and did, or how they behaved. And I was there, by the way, when Erik was, when Roger Clemens wasn't very kind to Erik. He was a bit of an arse, I have to say. So I'm with you, buddy. I like the fact they've been made to wait, but they 100% should both be in there. Were unbelievable players, and as you say, you can then be objective. But here's the big question: the new list of eligible players for next season's Hall of Fame. Tim Lincecum's on it. Tim Lincecum, he was the former Giants pitcher, wasn't he?
The guy won Cy Young awards. I mean, I get why he's on the ballot. The standard's obviously not incredibly as high for the ballot. I think that's fine. He's not going to stay on the ballot, but I think that's, again, a show of respect to me about the Hall of Fame. What I really want to emphasize here about this year is, I know we talked about Jeter, Larry Walker, a great player. I think it's really great he got in. The most important player who got in, baseball figure who got in, who to me is one of the 3 or 4 biggest game changers, was Marvin Miller, who ran the union, who really was the one who created free agency, who changed the balance of power between players and owners, changed the business of baseball in a way that overshadows any individual player who played. He finally got enshrined. Sadly, it was after he had passed away. Don Fehr, who was the head of the union after Miller had passed away, did his speech. And I know people said it was boring. I don't care. Marvin Miller, it's such righting a wrong that he is now in the Hall of Fame. So to me, that was the biggest story. I know for the average fan, it's Jeter or whatever, but to me, Marvin Miller being in the Hall of Fame, baseball did right by that finally. Yeah.
And actually, apparently, Don Fehr's speech was actually booed because it was that boring. But there you go. I agree with you 100%. And it is a bit sad because obviously Marvin Miller was held up basically because of, he was such a pain in the backside for these commissioners and none of them wanted to reward him.
I mean, the Bowie Kuhn and Bud Selig got him before Marvin Miller.
That's a nonsense. Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. Okay, well, I don't need you to comment on this, but I do want to mention it. Jacob deGrom, against all the odds, apparently, according to acting GM for the Mets, Zach Scott, he's told the New York Post that if deGrom's MRI on his right elbow comes back clean, he will begin rehabbing in order to make his return to the club, potentially by mid-September, regardless of the standing. So even if they are completely and utterly out of the race, and there's a real danger they're going to be very soon, the way things are going, they're still going to bring him back. They do, when you consider what a great player is, I do worry that the Mets don't take good care of him. They do seem to play him regardless of it being banged up, and you sort of feel that they're contributing to his ongoing injury woes. But
and you think of all the other injuries with Mets pitchers, whether it was Matt Harvey in the past or Noah Syndergaard, they just have a history of that. One thing I know it's not on our running order, Goldie, but we should mention is that there was a no-hitter that occurred. The Brewers, through the 9th no-hitter of the season, set the record for no-hitters. It was a combined one with Josh Hader, Corbin Burns, and they threw the 9th no-hitter. So this was record-breaking. I guess it's not surprising. I think what was interesting about this no-hitter, and we saw so many no-hitters at the start of the season, is that once Major League Baseball started pushing back on the tackiness of the balls, right, with all the stick-em and the sticky stuff, we saw sort of a drop on it, but this one obviously occurred. And what was most fascinating about this no-hitter was against the Cleveland Indians. third no-hitter against Cleveland this year. They set a record for futility, being no-hit 3 times in one season. And then Madison Bumgarner's, I believe, which was a 7-inning no-hitter, which doesn't count, was against them as well too. So tough times. And you want to know the crazy thing too? If you didn't see this as well, Zach Plesac was on the mound for all 3 of those no-hitters for the Indians.
No.
So the hitters got no hit when Zach Plesac was pitching for them. I mean, they talk about no support.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Zach, oh God, do you think Johnny the Jinx? It's Zach the Jinx. Don't the crows.
Seriously,
Nobody wants it. The poor bloke. Well, talking about relative legends, Pujols was back in St. Louis as a Dodger, and for the first time. And this is his first return to Busch Stadium since he's moved to the Dodgers. And this was last Tuesday. And guess what? Surprise, surprise! He hits a home run. And this I like, JC. Cards fans gave him a standing ovation when he stepped into the batter's box in the first inning for the Dodgers. I like that when you consider all the messy stuff that went on when he left and the question marks about whether he was relevant anymore. And let's face it, I think he has been as an addition to the Dodgers. We're not expecting him to be a day-by-day player, but he has contributed and he has made a difference.
Oh, big time. We owe him such a mea culpa, Gouldy. I know myself, and I believe David as well, too. I thought that when he got released by the Angels, his career was over. I mean, he just looked like he had nothing left in the tank. And I said, it doesn't matter where he goes. It's really over. And it would be just a total sideshow, carnival type of atmosphere. I was wrong, 150% wrong. Yeah. And, he's been probably like a replacement level player. Defensively, not that good, offensively, a little above. But the Dodgers have needed that, right? Cody Bellinger has been a complete train wreck this year. Yeah. Even Chris Taylor, who started the season really well, has struggled. He's given them something that they've needed to help keep that Dodger offense churning. Yeah. So, I mean, always going to tip my cap to Pujols for his career. But for what he has offered this season, totally wrong and real credit to him.
100%. And that was a 386-foot shot, solo shot, which, of course, was his 679th career home run. I'm assuming he's a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame when he eventually hangs up his bat.
Yeah, absolutely. The question is he's been good enough this year. Does he get a contract next year to make a run at 700? And I think that's really the more interesting question. I think Hall of Fame is a certainty.
He certainly wants it as well. Okay, well, let's talk about a potential future Hall of Famer. Maybe I'll get a bit above myself because it's literally his first season. The legend that is Wonder. Wonderful streak continues. I'm, of course, talking about Wonder. I got told off, by the way, for the way I pronounced it last time. I said Franco. It's not. It's Franco. Did you get that? Franco.
I did.
That's me working on my Spanish accent, buddy. The streak continues. He's gone to 39. He's now just 4 games shy of Frank Robinson for the record for the longest streak by a player aged 20 or younger, and that's in AL or NL history. But the bad news, he's on the IL as of Friday.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, again, when he came up, it started a little slow, which is not atypical for a player really getting their first long look at the majors. But what you look at that streak, you realize what's so impressive about him, because baseball, right, is a game of adjustments. What happens is typically a rookie like that either starts off really hot and then hits a really dry path, or they start off a little slow. They make the adjustments first to the hitters. They get a good run. The pitchers then make the adjustment back at them, and then they slow down. The fact that he's remained that consistent for that long, even when pitchers are making adjustments to him, suggests that he's a special type of player, that he has the potential. I mean, it's a little too early to say, but the potential to be an elite player.
Yeah. News on the Cleveland Indians front. It's not been a great season, has it? Terry Francona, the manager, out yet again, resting comfortably after undergoing toe surgery. This is his second operation since stepping aside for the season in July. He'd already stepped down, so he's had another operation since stepping down. And as we all know, he missed the majority of 2020 as well with gastrointestinal blood clot.
It was probably intense as well, too, Goldie's.
Yeah, he's had hip surgery. He's going to miss the rest of the season with an affected toe. I mean, it's a disaster. I worry that maybe his health isn't going to allow him to come back as a manager in the long term. But anyway, that's an update for Cleveland Indian fans. One thing I want to ask you just before we close out the news log, this story about the intentional balk in extra innings. I've tried to sort of look into this. I'm not really sure I understand it. Is this happening during the extra innings and just to avoid somebody on second who's starting on second having an opportunity to steal signs? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, the theory behind it is if you're up by more than a couple of runs, so you've been the first team in the extra inning, you've put up a couple of runs on the board. So the home team comes up and that runner on second means nothing, right? If that runner scores, big
Yeah.
deal. It won't matter. You're still going to be leading. So rather than allow them to be on second, maybe pick up signs, maybe give something back to the hitter, you just let them go to third and you let them balk. And I mean, this seems like the ultimate of anorak decisions, but someone has probably done the number crunching and made that decision. But I guess there's a little less pressure. I think the other thing that would impact is if you have a pitcher who throws out of the windup or the stretch. When the runner's on second, you're always going to throw out of the stretch, which is a certain way in which you throw, where you're sort of sideways and you don't have as much of a windup. When a runner gets to third, you can go back into the windup, which is a little easier. So if you have a certain pitcher, a lot of relief pitchers now just throw out of the stretch because you end up throwing out of that position more often. But if you have a pitcher who likes to throw out of the windup, it's better to have him on third base too. It's just interesting, the cat and mouse game as rules change, people try and figure out better ways and different ways to succeed.
Well, one thing I do want to ask you about it, though, is having watched it, and I think the two that I watched was Colin McHugh and Corey Neville, they made no effort to disguise that it was just deliberate. And that sort of therefore opens up a bit of a question mark as to how umpires will then interpret that, whether they're going to allow the ball to stand or whether they're going to say, no, hang on, you're taking the mick here and put them back on second.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of the balk, right, is to protect runners from actions that really make it impossible for the runner to be able to read what's going on in the situation. And to your point, the balk in that circumstance isn't for that. It's for something completely different. So it'll be one to watch.
Right, buddy. Well, I've done the view to Akil, our dear friend Akil Badu, which is how we always round up the news lot. And I had a quick look, and since he hasn't played for a couple of days, but since he does seem to have a little bit of a platoon role going. But since we were last on air, I can tell you he's gone 4 for 19. He's only had a couple of runs scored, but he also registered an error. And obviously his defensive capabilities have been a big part of why he's maintained his role. But they keep playing him lead off. But it does seem he has a bit of a platoon, depending on whether it's a lefty or a righty on the mound. So, yeah, well, at least
I think the bottom line, he's done us proud.
He has.
Rule 5 player, stayed
100%.
up in the bigs all year. He has definitely maybe broken our curse, maybe.
Hey, hang on, buddy. Let's face it. When we had the discussion at the beginning, shall we follow how he gets on? We were all anticipating that we were off to AAA or AA eventually. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, all credit to him. He's hung in there. And the Tigers haven't been nearly as bad as everybody said they were going to be. Anyway, let's move it on. Ding, ding. There we go. That was batter number 1. We move on swiftly to batter number 2. And this one is a sort of... a look back on history, and a very, very sad bit of history, because, of course, we've just had the anniversary of 9/11. Where were we all 20 years ago? I'll quickly remind you, JC, because, of course, you were not doing Channel 5 baseball at that time. Is that right? Just confirm that for me.
I started in 2002.
That's it. Yeah.
So I was about to move to the UK right before this happened.
Now, how freaky is this, JC? I was working for London Tonight that day. I was actually running the sports desk, the ITV news program. And I remember, so of course I was in the office and somebody shouted, bloody, guys, come and have a look. And, we thought that some small plane had accidentally flown into one of the Twin Towers. And we were like, well, how do you do that? How do you make that mistake? And we were all watching the TV when suddenly we saw this massive plane go into the second tower, and it was just one of the most horrific experiences of my life. And everybody was, was really sort of traumatized, and people were trying to remain calm because it was a newsroom. And I remember just sitting there going, okay, well, there ain't no sport today. I'm going home. And actually, that's all I want to do, except I couldn't go home. I had another job to do. In fact, I had 3 jobs that day, would you believe? And I couldn't believe the second job wasn't cancelled. And it was a disaster. It was one of the worst things that I ever did in my life. I won't even bother you with the details. The whole thing was a disaster. And then I had to go and do Live and Dangerous on Channel 5 at about midnight. And I just remember all I wanted to do was go home. And I think a lot of people felt the same. They just wanted to go home to their families, hug their wives, hug their kids, and just, feel safe. Because I think that was the overriding memory I have, is that for the first time ever, particularly the people in America didn't feel safe in their own homes. That was how horrifically traumatic the whole experience, the visual experience was. And those awful scenes of 3,000 plus people losing their lives in what just seemed like an attack on a whole country that was the US. So what were your memories? Because as you say, you weren't over till a year later. So you were in the States. What were your memories of it?
Well, September 11th is my birthday. So I turned 30 on September 11th, on 9/11, the actual day.
Yeah.
And I actually ended up, we were going to have a birthday party, but we ended up getting together. It was not a celebration or a birthday party because I wanted to see all my friends and wanted to be close to them. And it was a very somber experience. For the purposes of our show, obviously, baseball played a huge role. It shut down immediately. And then when it came back, and George W. Bush, to call him polarizing is probably to give him a little more credit. I think, there are a lot more people who are critical of Bush and his reign. Obviously, the war in Afghanistan just ended, and that was sort of an offshoot of what happened in 9/11. But you have to give him credit for him going onto the mound, showing, everyone was scared. He was scared to be out in public. And I believe he might have even been wearing a flak jacket underneath his jacket, went onto the mound. A lot of politicians, they'll go a little closer and threw an absolute strike. I mean, it was just a sign of like, we're not going to give up. We know that someone has hit us hard, but we have the guts and the attitude to keep on moving on. It was an inspirational moment, whatever you thought of him as a politician, I have to be honest.
Yeah.
And the rest of that season was so compelling because baseball continued on. That's always been one of the hallmarks of baseball, right? When World War II commenced, at least in the US side, one of the things that Franklin Delano Roosevelt insisted on was that the baseball seasons continued because it showed that, we still maintained a real life. And the same thing occurred after 9/11. And that World Series between the Yankees and the Diamondbacks that year was just an amazing World Series. And I think it was a moment for baseball to really play the role of the national pastime. And I thought it did. It played a very valuable role at that time and place.
Well, of course, God Bless America now in its 20th year anniversary of being sung in the seventh inning stretch, and the celebration of those, the first responders, and really sort of in a way also in the way that we did during the pandemic, really focusing on those heroes that work in the NHS and saying thank you, people who you take for granted in the same way that I think, we took the police force, the fire brigades, etc. And then people realize these guys risk their lives, these men and women risk their lives every day they go to work, and we should acknowledge that, and we should show our appreciation. And I agree with you. I thought baseball played a huge part. I mean, just rewinding for our own experience here in the UK, which you won't know, the following day, Wednesday, the 12th of September, the game that was meant to be on was the White Sox v the Yankees on Channel 5. And I remember Erik telling me this. I mean, this is awful. Channel 5 phoned him up and said, is the game going to be on? And he's like, well, I don't know. Obviously at the moment it's chaos. And they said, well, we need you to find out because we need to work the schedule. And he was like, well, how do you want me to find out? You need to call Yankee Stadium. You need to phone Yankee Stadium and find out. And this was when the Twin Towers were still burning, buddy. And is this game going to be going ahead? Just the most gross insensitivity. And Erik says to this day, he hates himself because it's exactly what he did. He phoned up and said, hey guys, it's Erik and phoning on behalf of UK Channel 5 baseball coverage, will the game be going on? And they were like, for real? Are you asking this question? And he said he hated himself. And I mean, I really feel for him because, we know what a fantastic guy Erik is. And we know he would have hated doing that, but he was basically told to do it. And what we ended up doing, and I'll never forget it actually, it was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do in my life. I went into the studio, it was just me on my own, and I did I think it was like a 40-minute show, and I did a piece to camera at the beginning, just talking about what had happened, that obviously baseball was appropriately going to be shutting down, and we showed some reactions and some sound bites, and it was incredibly somber and incredibly tough. And then I think we threw to a massive sort of history of baseball, and that was it. And of course, and then it was a really, the experience beyond that was one of immense pride that we were there to witness baseball, as you rightly say, playing such a huge part in helping America heal. And I do think it was one of baseball and MLB's finest hours, the way they reacted to it and the support that they universally gave, and the way they encouraged America to get back to normality, but forever recognizing and showing appreciation of those first responders. It was an incredible mixed emotion, and what a season. And as you rightly say, what a way it ended with what is, for no doubt in my mind, since I've been really keenly following baseball, one of the greatest World Series ever. The Yankees with the D-backs goes to 7 games. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, was it? You know, Randy Johnson. Oh my God, what a World Series that was.
Yeah, I mean, sports can be a salve, right? It really can be when it's done right. And that was one of the times where it's done right. You know, you wonder today whether it has that same ability to galvanize people in the same direction. You know, I worry about that, whether it's baseball or anything else, that we're so divided, and any effort to make any sort of statement for anything is somehow, there's always going to be a party who's going to scoff and say, meh. So I wonder whether what happened on 9/11 in the subsequent weeks and months is something that could happen again in terms of sports playing that role.
I'm encouraged, buddy. I mean, I went out to a birthday lunch today, and all anybody wanted to talk about was young Emma winning the US Open. Wasn't she amazing? And everybody was just, you know, smiles, and everybody was had been watching. And none of my friends are tennis fans, but they got so caught up in what a beautiful person she is, with an amazing smile, and what an incredible story to go through 3 rounds of qualifiers and win a major at the age of 18, having not dropped a single set. I mean, it is an extraordinary story.
I mean, sports can always be inspirational. I think that's a story of inspiration, and I think that will always exist, but that's relatively fleeting. I'm talking about galvanizing, where the activities really get people to look at the world a little differently.
Yeah.
And I felt like, you know, that's when everyone was sort of lost and scared, baseball played a little bit of a role for a lot of people in galvanizing them to be strong. Yeah. And the story you're talking about is a great one, and it's inspirational, and it can get people up. It gives them a little boost, but it doesn't have the legs to make a difference. And I, you know, I don't know if sports can do that anymore, you know, taking the knee and things that try and bring people together, show warmth and empathy. There are always going to be a group of people who think, meh.
Yeah. No, you're right, mate. You're right. Or either that, or we're just getting old. Anyway, I'm going to hit the bell. I'm going to hit the bell because we've got some more reminiscing to do. So we're moving on to batter number 3.
Nostalgic show.
It is, mate. Well, it's your birthday, so I mean, that's exactly what you do when you're celebrating a birthday. You do get a bit nostalgic. We talk about
birthday. I mean, you and I, we've 10 years apart, right? You just had your 60th. I'm on my 50th.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. We need to find someone who's turning 40 to pick up the baton for us.
Absolutely. Well, that's the great thing about a podcast, isn't it? I mean, nobody can see how aged we are. You know, we can sound youthful. Well, batter number 3, and I'm loving this. I've actually written an article about this last week. Is the summer of '98. It was obviously my first full season presenting Channel 5 baseball with the legend that was Todd Macklin, and we had so much fun. Oh my God, I have such keen memories of how the whole season just got so galvanized by this story. And I mentioned earlier in the program, you know, that it was meant to be Ken Griffey Jr. and Mark McGwire. And in fact, of course, Ken Griffey Jr. sort of fell away a little bit. Sammy Sosa, I think he hit 20 home runs in June '98 to suddenly put himself into the race, and him and Big Mac were just literally going backwards and forwards. And yet at one stage, Big Mac, I could tell you, on May the 25th, Mark McGwire had hit 25 home runs and Sammy Sosa had hit 10. Can you believe that? 15 difference, so less than half.
Well, and Griffey was in it in the first part of the season, as
yes, he was.
Out.
Oh yeah,
he was definitely in the conversation. Yeah,
100%. And yet Sosa, by the time they got to August the 10th, they were for 46 apiece on August the 10th. So despite giving him a monster lead, Sosa had such an amazing summer. And that was, of course, when it really started to capture everybody's imagination, that the two of them were pushing each other forward. And of course, you know, we were all conveniently ignoring everything that we now know about the use of anaerobic steroids, which of course were actually illegal, but MLB didn't bother to police it until I believe 2003, 2 years after Barry Bonds had broken the record again. And you know what, buddy, I can't help but still look back on it, even though it's now tainted as a memory, with fondness, because it was unbelievably exciting. You were in the States. Was it every bit as exciting over there?
Well, it was so necessary for baseball. Baseball was on the precipice of irrelevancy at that point, right? They were just a few years out from a strike. And
in 94,
really
in
94, and the fans had not come back really. There wasn't a lot of energy. This gave that situation a 180. It turned around completely. And I remember I was working in a newsroom. I was a journalist, wasn't a sports newsroom. And people when it was time for the game to start, the 6:05 start time, whatever it was on the West Coast, people would be running to TVs. We'd be turning on TVs because everyone wanted to watch it. It really was a difference maker for baseball. It was amazing. And what helped was Sammy Sosa's personality, right?
Yeah.
If it had have been, and Griffey Jr. might have been a little different, right? Because he had a great personality, but he didn't like the media piece so much.
No.
Obviously, McGwire was a more reticent personality, and he would go out there and he'd do some stuff, but he didn't have that warm. But Sosa pulled it out of him. I mean, Sosa with his kissing the fingers, touching the chest, pointing up, he was such a dynamic character, and that was a huge part of that whole process. That's what it wasn't just the home runs; it was him and how exuberant he was, how excited it was, and that, as you pointed out, Gouldy, the expectation that he would be in that race wasn't there. And so the combination of all those factors really, really helped turn this into the center of attention in America, whether you were a sports fan or not.
And buddy, of course, people forget that when Mark McGwire broke the record that held for 37 years by Roger Maris, who of course broke the record of the Babe, and hit his 62nd home run, the Cards were playing the Cubs. So it was Sammy versus Big Mac. I mean, you couldn't write the script, and you're absolutely right. I mean, even though obviously Sammy Sosa is now associated not just with the anabolic steroids, but also with the cork bat, et cetera, he was an incredibly infectious personality. And at the time, everybody loved him. And I thought he showed immense grace when you consider that it was McGwire that broke the record. He was out there giving him massive hugs, congratulating him. It really was a good news story. It was unbelievably exciting. And I remember every game we showed that we would stop from the game we were watching and the broadcaster go, right, we're going over to Busch Stadium because Mark McGwire's got an at-bat. We literally watched every at-bat for weeks of Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa because of the excitement of, would one of them hit another home run?
It's just interesting to look back on it now. And obviously they both have the taint of steroids. And we've already talked about that issue as it relates to Clemens and to Bonds. I personally, I don't see McGwire or Sosa. Either of them should be in the Hall of Fame. McGwire had some great on-base percentage numbers in the era of modern analytics. He actually looks a lot better than in the old style batting average look and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, when you look at Sosa, his pure number of home runs are quite high, and you would think that would get him in. But to me, neither of them are Hall of Famers, much in the same way that Maris, despite the way he was a back-to-back MVP and held that home run record, isn't. But nevertheless, that period of time shouldn't be looked down upon or dismissed because of what was going on as part of the sideshow. And I know ESPN did a great 30 for 30 on this. I would encourage people to try and find it and watch it. It's a really fun look back on that period. And, we're talking about how old we are. We were young then. Yeah, and it was just a lot of fun. I was,
I was still old, mate. I was 37. I was very old.
I was still playing ball and playing it pretty seriously. And so it was fun to watch the sport that I was still competing in.
I'm really surprised you don't think they would even be considered. I mean, Sammy Sosa's 9th all time, 609 home runs. Mark McGwire, who of course also won Rookie of the Year, so it wasn't like he was a flash in the pan in his first ever season, and he ended up with 583. He's 11th all time, so 9th and 11th, and yet you don't think they're even.
I don't, because I really make a subjective distinction between them and Bonds and Clemens, who were great all-around players before the taint. Their overall numbers in all facets of what they did were great. Really, you're pinning your Hall of Fame hopes for both those guys on home runs. And I just disagree with what McGwire had said, which is, I'm going to hit a home run anyway, whether I have a little bit more power. It doesn't work that way. It is a difference maker. And I think that when you're looking at just one statistic, and again, I think McGwire actually shows better. His batting average wasn't great, but his on-base percentage was godly. Yeah. And so, there may be some other arguments there, but when home runs is really the one counting stat that you're using to get you over the top, under the circumstances, it doesn't quite raise to the level for me.
All right, buddy, we've done enough nostalgic work for one show. Let's move things off. Ding, ding, ding. We're moving into the 7th inning stretch. Very happy always say that the job of coming up with a baseball book or a baseball cultural reference is not mine, it's Josh's. What have you got for me, big guy?
So I'm going to start with a book that admittedly I have not read fully yet, but it's one that I have had and I really want to read. It's fantastic by all accounts book, one of the real seminal books of baseball. It's called Baseball in the Garden of Eden, Secret History of the Early Game by John Thorne. John Thorne now is the historian for Major League Baseball. He's a guy I know, fantastic individual. The book really explains the early history of baseball. If you ask a casual fan who started baseball, the first name that always comes to mind that is completely apocryphal is Abner Doubleday. He really had nothing to do with it. The second, for people who are a little bit more knowledgeable about baseball, is Alexander Cartwright, who was a big figure early in baseball. He was a journalist. He helped really move baseball along. But in terms of the people who really did turn baseball into the sport it became, and obviously baseball was an offshoot of a lot of games played in the UK. I think there's no doubt about that. But as its own specific entity, this book really fills in the blanks. Guys like Doc Adams, there are these names that really a lot of people don't know about. And this book gives you those names and can really teach you a lot about the origins of baseball, the true origins of baseball, rather than a lot of the sort of legendary stories that kind of are bandied about a lot in the sport.
Okay, buddy. Quick reminder of the title again, and show everybody, if anybody watching on YouTube can see the book. What was the title again?
Here is the book. It's called Baseball in the Garden of Eden: A Secret History of the Early Game, and it's by John Thorne.
Love it. Brilliant stuff. What about a cultural reference?
So I wanted to go baseball cards, and we've talked about this a lot, and I think I've even referenced this, but we haven't given it the full time. And I know we discussed a number of weeks back Topps. Now it looks that they're going to get pushed aside and no longer be kind of the major card company. But if you date back before the 1950s, there were other card companies, and I just wanted to give a shout out to my favorite baseball card set, because baseball cards are a huge part of it, and it is the 1933 Gowdy set. I'm going to give you an example of one of the cards here. For the people who are looking, and you can, if you look at the cards, what was so amazing about these were drawings, hand drawings of players during really one of the halcyon periods of baseball. So you have so many great players, from Tris Speaker to Pie Traynor to Lou Gehrig in this set, and they're these really ornately, beautifully drawn cards with very thoughtful writing on the back. And so I just wanted to give a shout out. I mean, it's a cultural reference to an era of baseball cards that no longer exists. They were given out with gum during that period, and it is my personal all-time favorite baseball card set. They have some great catcher cards too, and so I'm always a little bit about the catchers. I think I have one more over here that I can show you. No, that's not.
Are they valuable? Are they valuable if you find one in mint condition?
Oh yeah, the Lou Gehrig cards, $50,000, something like that, 50, 60,000. Wow. This is my favorite here. This is Virgil Davis. And just as a great card, like he's wearing all his equipment. He's got his glove out. Catchers used to set up a little differently. You'd have sort of one hand out and your glove separately, because you had to have the hand out because you couldn't catch a ball single-handedly. You needed the second hand to cup it back in the 30s. So these cards tell you a lot about the history of baseball during that period.
Looks like some scene out of a horror movie, quite frankly, that one. Anyway, right. Time for the trivia answer. Quick reminder for you, JC. I asked you to name the team that suffered the most home runs from Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire in that great summer of '98. I mentioned they hit home runs against 21 teams, but the foremost was the Phillies, the Marlins, the Brewers, and the Expos. The question was, which one had the most?
Okay, so I don't know the answer, obviously, so I'm going to have to give it sort of a educated guess.
Okay.
And so I look at those teams, and there was only one other team who were in the same division as the Cubs and the Cardinals.
Yeah.
So most likely they played that team the most out of the ones you mentioned. So I'm going to go with the Brewers.
You're going with the Brewers. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you in no particular order.
Of
being Eric. Okay.
You're loving this, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I am. Phillies, 13 home runs.
Okay.
Marlins, 11 home runs. Expos, despite giving up 5, the last 5, only 9, despite giving up 5 in the last series of the season. So that's 9, 11, and 13. And you went with the last one, which was the Brewers, who gave up and I'm loving your logic, and that's why you're the genius that you are. 16
Hey,
home runs. You're absolutely right. Well done,
Oh, that
buddy.
makes me
Well
happy.
done.
That was purely educated guess. I had no basis other than that. No
Well,
internal
it was a really, really good guess. Yeah. The Dodgers gave up 5, the Padres 8, D-backs 9, Mets 6. Yeah, no, even the Braves only gave up 5. And then of course they obviously had some interleague play. The Indians a couple, Tigers a couple, Royals 1, Pirates 5. Yeah,
You don't need to read the whole list.
No, I know it's getting boring
good,
now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly, no sign. I don't think they hit any against Boston, the Red Sox, or the Yankees, because as I mentioned, there was only 21 clubs. Anyway, there you go. That's this week's trivia, and no surprise that JC yet again nails it. Now, mailbag. You know that we love it when you get in touch with us and you send us questions, you send us comments, and I always like taking a photo. This is what I do, JC. Now, during the week when I see something, I have a quick photo to see if there's anything of interest. Well, the one thing I definitely want to mention, and we promised we'd give this a big shout out, is that the MLB UK community have got another live watch event. And this is happening next week. It's Saturday, the 18th of September. They're going to be teaming up with at BS UK again at the Home Run House. And this is for a huge event for fans, and they're saying join us from 5 p.m. until close for food, batting cages, and live MLB. So you need to go onto either the MLB UK community Twitter account or the BS UK account and register. My understanding is you do need to register. And the Home Run House, by the way, is in Stratford. It's in part of the City Olympic Park in London E20. So,
and Goldie, let me piggyback on that for anyone who wants to follow the GB national team who are unaware of where to go. Go to WBSCEurope.org and you can follow games there. Just look for events and then scroll down to the European Championships, and you can follow the national team. My former side for a decade.
Well, buddy, just keep you abreast of the stories on Twitter and social media. This is one I picked up on, was the Orioles manager, Brandon Hyde, basically sledging the Blue Jays pitcher, Robbie Ray. I mean, really, did you see that?
Yeah.
Is that common? I've never seen that.
Sure, absolutely. The difference is that you have so few people in the stands that you can pick it up on the mic more. But that sort of razzing, is the way they call it in the U.S., talking smack, is not uncommon even at the major league level.
Okay. Because Blue Jays fans UK, thank you for sending that across to us, because he wanted us to give it a mention. I must admit, I was quite shocked by that.
I think it's a little surprising, maybe the manager doing it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly
they should be a little above it. Yeah,
100%.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Got another one here, and this is, I'm assuming this is true. Outfielder Hunter Renfroe, on team's COVID issues, this is what he's been quoted as saying: MLB basically told us to stop the testing and just treat the symptoms. We're like, no, we're going to figure out what's going and keep this thing under control. So MLB, he was then asked, so they asked you to stop testing? And Renfroe said, yes. Have you seen this? Is this story in America at all?
I haven't. I mean, I'm sure it's out there. I actually hadn't seen it. Red Sox have been hit pretty hard by COVID. It's sort of gone through their clubhouse. And if that's the case, that's being willfully ignorant, and that's just wrong.
Oh, terrific, isn't it? Now, before we round off this mailbag, and many thanks to everybody that gets in touch, we should mention, and this is one hell of a story, buddy. As we know, the Blue Jays are scoring for fun right now. I believe, as of tonight, the 12th of September, they are in the lead in the AL wildcard. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the Red Sox disappointed me at the trading deadline. There was no doubt about that they didn't really do a ton. And then with this COVID activity, they're just sort of teetering off. I think the team we don't talk about a lot, sorry, I'm going to move to the other league very quickly, are the Milwaukee Brewers, and what a year they've had. I mean, they're running away with it in the Central.
Yeah.
And we talk about all these other teams. We spent so much time on the Padres. That Brewers team is great. It's a really good team.
Yeah.
Up and down. They've got good depth in their bullpen. I think they have a chance to be competitive in the postseason.
100%. They've won their last 5, 7-3, and as you say, they're just cruising towards the championship title. Mind you, the San Francisco Giants are still the best team, not just in terms of record, but they've won their last 7, got 9-1 in their last 10, and that, of course, was in reaction to the Dodgers closing up and actually joining them at the top of the West, and they've just kicked the Dodgers, who are now, what are they back? think they are a couple back. Is that right? 2-2-3 back. And of course, Toronto have gone 9-1 as well. So those are the hot teams right now, the Giants, the Brewers, and the Blue Jays. I'm loving what the Blue Jays are doing because I tipped them to win the East. I mean, they're not going to do that. Tampa are far too far in front. But I'm loving the fact that we're going to see them in the postseason if they keep this up.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Tampa and the Giants. I still am not a believer in the Giants, and I hope I'm just made wrong because I love that team so much. Like, Gabe Kapler's a really interesting dude. When he was with the Dodgers, just thinks about things differently as a manager, but he gets productivity out of players who aren't big names. I keep on thinking about Lamont Wade and what he's done on that team all year, former University of Maryland player. And the guy just, he steps up at the right time. And there's just such a team atmosphere there that you got to love about the Giants this year.
Brilliant stuff. Buddy, I know you must be exhausted. You've had a very busy day and, of course, celebrating your birthday or weekend. So we're going to wrap this show up. Do get in touch. You've got the buttons at the bottom. Please do hit the subscribe, hit the like, get in touch. You can get us via Twitter or Facebook, as you know. And, of course, don't forget to check out our other podcasts, all part of the Ted Fred stable, Behind Home Plate, at BHP Pod. That is the Twitter handle. And that is, of course, the fantasy baseball that I present with the legend that is Mr. James Holden. And, of course, do check out the Nat Coombs Show, and that's at the NC Show. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. We're all over social media, big guy. You think we're old? You think we're past it? Not according to modern youth, mate. We're still relevant. Always be relevant, Goldie. As long as we're breathing, we'll make our mark, kiddo. Buddy, been a joy. Always a joy. Huge congratulations, and enjoy the rest of your birthday celebrations. Cheers. Have a good week, Goldie. Thanks, buddy. Look forward to seeing you next weekend. That's it from us. Thank you for joining us on the Jonny and Josh Show. Till next time, stay well and stay safe.